Number 1.
Lyana Sawyer, 16, was 5 months pregnant when she vanished on December 19, 2018. She was last seen at her high school in Jacksonville, Florida. Surveillance cameras captured her leaving the school carrying 2 large bags around lunchtime that day. Lyana never returned home that afternoon and has never been seen or heard from again. Once Lyana was reported missing, investigators quickly identified her uncle, 33-year-old Jonathan Quiles, as a person of interest. Jonathan was arrested on January 9, 2019, for suspected sexual battery against his underage babysitter. While behind bars, he reportedly admitted to a fellow inmate that he may be the father of Lyana's unborn child. Lyana and other relatives were living with Jonathan for weeks at a time prior to Lyana's disappearance, and investigators found even more evidence of an inappropriate relationship between the teen and her uncle on Lyana's computer. Investigators discovered various writings authored by Lyana that implied a sexual relationship between her and Jonathan. They also found a letter written by Lyana in which she professes her love for Jonathan and expresses that she wants to run away with him so they can be a family. Investigators also spoke with Jonathan's brother, who told them that Jonathan confessed to murdering Lyana. His brother stated that Jonathan told him he choked Lyana to death. He reportedly said she wasn't dying right and it was making Jonathan sick looking at her. Despite all of this, Jonathan has publicly denied being involved in Lyana's case, and he has still not faced any charges related to her pregnancy or disappearance. However, suspicions against him remain strong, as he is currently behind bars on suspicion of having an inappropriate relationship with another underage girl. Meanwhile, Lyana remains missing, and her family members believe she met with foul play at the hands of Jonathan Quiles. Jonathan Quiles has been indicted on murder charges in the death of Lyana Sawyer and her unborn child. The indictment states that Jonathan shot Lyana to death on either December 19 or December 20 of 2018. Although Lyana's body has still not been found, the state was able to gather enough evidence for Jonathan to be indicted by a grand jury. He remains behind bars for multiple charges at this time as his cases are pending. Florida police are investigating Lyana's disappearance. If you have any information that could help the investigation, you can anonymously submit a tip by calling 1-866-845-8477.
Number 2.
In the fall of 2017, 19-year-old Jared Chavis had just finished 10 months in the Air Force when he decided to move from his home state of Louisiana down to Houston, Texas, his father Willie Smith told us. He went down there for more opportunities. He was taking online classes. He had a job hooking up satellite dishes, Willie said of his son Jared. I was proud of him. Jared had only been in Houston for a few months and was living with Willie's niece. Willie said he spoke to his son about once a week, but his wife, Angela, spoke to their son every day. On January 12, 2018, she spoke to him about 9 p.m. that night, Willie told us, adding that nothing seems out of the ordinary. What seemed like a typical Friday night for their son turned into the beginning of what Willie calls an unimaginable nightmare within a couple of hours. Family would later learn that at 10:39 p.m. that night, witnesses saw Jared get into a black Ford Fusion in the 8800 block of Westheimer Road in Houston, Texas, according to a press release from Crime Stoppers of Houston. While Jared was riding in the back seat of a black Ford Fusion driven by the suspect, a verbal disagreement occurred and gunshots were fired, the release states. According to a witness, Jared Chavis never exited the vehicle and has not been seen since. On Tuesday, Houston Police Department homicide investigator Gordon Sullivan told us that he had been assigned the case 1 month after Jared's disappearance, even though it is still being worked as a missing person case. There's information that we do have, but of course I can't comment on that because it's an open and active investigation," Investigator Sullivan said. "At this time, we are looking into multiple suspects. I'm not saying multiple did it, but we are investigating multiple people." A Crime Stoppers of Houston press release names one suspect as Bolt Suave, but Houston police declined to confirm or deny such details. Jared's father, Willie, says he and his wife, who live in Louisiana, heard from family the following day, a Saturday, that Jared had not come home. Willie added that he tried calling his son's phone, but it was going straight to voicemail. "I got on the road and I got there Sunday," Willie told us. "I stayed in Houston a whole week, searching dumpsters, searching everywhere. And nobody was telling me anything. The number one thing we do want out there in public is that he is missing, his family is concerned, and he hasn't been heard from since January 12, Investigator Sullivan told us. "We are still actively following leads as they come in. We have been searching anywhere our leads take us." Investigator Sullivan declined to comment on where, exactly, authorities have searched. In September of 2018, 9 months after Jared was last seen, Willie traveled back down to Houston to continue searching for his son. "I went down and put out flyers. I go door to door talking to people," Willie said. "And we put up $5,000 for a reward." This past Saturday, at a prayer vigil on the anniversary of Jared's disappearance, Crime Stoppers of Houston announced an increased reward of $10,000 for information on his case. "Jared had a son that was born in April, and now we have the baby because the mom is in the Air Force," Willie told us. "We get by day and wait for God to give the answers." Jared Chavis is described as being 5'7" and weighing 160 pounds, with brown eyes and black hair. Jared has the following tattoos: on his upper left arm, the words "Hell" in Welsh, his grandmother's name, inside of praying hands with the date she died. On his right tricep, the letter J. On his left tricep, the letter C. On his inner right forearm, the quote "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." He was last seen wearing jeans, a red hoodie, white t-shirt, denim vest and orange LeBron James tennis shoes. If you have any information on Jared's whereabouts, please call the Houston Police Department at 832-394-1840.
Number 3.
The 23-year-old mother from Dixon Agency has become a well-known face in the missing and murdered Indigenous persons (MMIP) crisis in Montana and now worldwide. MTN News first reported the disappearance of Jermain in the summer of 2018. 3 years later, her case has not seen any closure. Here's a breakdown of some of the key dates from her disappearance. June 15, 2018. Jermain was seen at the Badlander Bar in downtown Missoula. Just after midnight, a Missoula Housing Authority camera recorded her walking out of the alley behind the Badlander Bar. This is the last known visual of Jermain alive. The following day, June 16, Jermain's reported last location was the Orange Street Food Farm where she was allegedly dropped off. Multiple searches were held in the area. However, in the podcast Stolen, the search for Jermain Charlo, Missoula Police Detective Guy Baker told podcast producer Connie Walker that Jermain was actually dropped off near the intersection of Prince and South 5th Street West, 8 blocks away from the Orange Street Food Farm. During a protest in March of 2021, MTN News viewed a 2018 search warrant which showed Jermain's cell phone was active near Evro until 10 a.m. the day of her disappearance, June 16. MTN News sat down with Detective Baker for his reflection on the past 3 years of Jermain's case, which remains an active investigation. So it's not a closed case, it's not a cold case. It's still very active, Baker told MTN News. He's the second detective to be in charge of the case, 11 days after Jermain was last seen on an unreleased Missoula Housing Authority video. Baker was reassigned to the case and now works to solve it. Baker said he continues to stay in touch with Jermain's family to keep them in the loop, but many caveats of his research are unreleased to protect the investigation's integrity. He stands by his work for Jermain, who he says is the only Native American woman being worked as missing in Missoula. "I think you always look to the past to see if you can do better. You try to do the best job you can under the circumstances, but, looking back some things could have been done a little differently that I think would have been beneficial, but nothing was done wrong, or was detrimental I should say, to the investigation," Baker explained. Media undoubtedly plays a role here. Gimlet Media, a division of Spotify, released a podcast documenting Jermain's case this year. Baker is prominently featured in the reporting. An issue that comes up between the public and law enforcement is perception. And what everyone's perception is to them is reality, when in fact, it may not be actual reality. So, the podcast was not entirely accurate. So, people have listened to that, and they have drawn some conclusions that might not be entirely correct, Baker said. Baker said sometimes the police are not in a position to correct the record, as that could jeopardize an investigation, and would not clarify what those facts were. Last year, journalist Connie Walker was on the ground in Missoula doing her own investigation. There's never been a request for the Missoula Police Department or Guy Baker to correct anything in our podcast, Walker said. Walker, an Indigenous Cree woman from Canada, documented the case in the 8-episode Stolen: The Search for Jermain. She studied Jermain's past and spoke with family, friends, and Detective Baker. "I've actually been hearing from so many people in and around Missoula who knew of Jermain or knew people in the podcast," Walker said. "And I'm continuing to have those conversations. I am really hoping to do more reporting on Jermain's case as soon as we can." Since the podcast's final episode release, it has reached an international level, resonating with Indigenous communities primarily, but also those unaware of the MMIP issue. This crisis of violence that so many Indigenous women and girls face, and men and boys in Canada and in the United States, Walker explained. To Walker, her work isn't just a job. Her own Indigenous community also experiences a height of violence. Getting to learn about Jermain's life through her family and friends has been such a privilege and an honor, and I treat it as a responsibility, Walker said. Something echoed between Walker and Baker: more information is out there. For all of the reporting that we've been able to do, obviously it's great to raise awareness about Jermain's case on a national level or international level, but I think that it's particularly important that people there in her community are also paying attention and know the story of Jermain's story, and that her disappearance is still unsolved, Walker said. These sources want to make clear that Jermain Charlo is not just a face on a billboard. Anyone with information about the case should contact local law enforcement or Detective Baker at 406-552-6284. Since Jermain's disappearance in 2018, a number of resources and guidelines have been generated to address the MMIP crisis. Montana's Missing Indigenous Persons Task Force was created in 2019 to help administer grant money and improve interagency collaboration, and last October, Blackfeet Community College launched a website meant to streamline the process of reporting a missing person on the Blackfeet Nation. CSKT joined the portal last month. Meanwhile, the Snowbird Fund became available in February to financially help Native American families search for their missing loved ones. And in April, CSKT completed the nation's first tribal community response plan, a coordinated effort meant to serve as a guide in Indigenous communities when responding to a report of a missing person.
Number 4.
For the families of victims killed in unsolved murders, life is at a standstill. The Inquirer is highlighting a series of cold cases, summarized and analyzed by the journalists whose careers largely focus on unsolved murders. The creators of Cincinnati.com's Accused podcast. If you have any information on any unsolved case, please reach out to the appropriate law enforcement agency. Suggestions for cases to highlight can be sent to accused@inquirer.com. The crime: when skeletal remains were discovered in 2019, the people who'd found them thought they'd finally found 30-year-old Joshue Wright. Wright had last been seen February 3, 2018. A few days later, his truck was found abandoned on a quiet stretch of Forbus Street in South Fairmount. They were sure he was dead because, soon after he disappeared, an anonymous caller told them so. "He's dead and you won't find his body," the voice had said. But a year later, another call came, this time telling Wright's family that they could find his remains in a wooded South Fairmount lot. The family searched and, sure enough, eventually found bones, so they naturally assumed they'd found Wright. But they hadn't. In reality, the remains belonged to another man, 67-year-old Gary Boyd. Boyd had fallen out of touch with his family years earlier and hadn't even been reported missing. What happened to both men is still a mystery. About Wright: when Wright's family reported him missing, they said he'd last been seen at Moosewood Avenue and Bowling Green Court in Cincinnati. Wright, who was about 6 feet tall and 220 pounds, had been driving his 2012 GMC Sierra pickup truck. Even before the truck was found abandoned, Cincinnati police issued a critical missing alert, meaning the disappearance was immediately considered suspicious. Haley Renee Dawson, Wright's niece, said Wednesday that the family is determined to keep his story alive until they know what happened to him. "I miss everything about him," she wrote in a message. "Joshua was a great uncle and friend. He was my best friend since birth. There was nothing in the world he wouldn't do for the ones he loved." Shannon Morris, one of Wright's friends, told Inquirer reporting partner FOX19 that his loved ones had every reason to believe the skeletal remains they found were his. The call came at the anniversary of Wright's disappearance, and the plot of land they'd been pointed to was only blocks from where Wright's truck had been found the previous year. "The tip led us here, so it was like a puzzle was going together," Morris said. When they learned the remains weren't Wright's, they were devastated. "We're back to ground zero. We have to start over," she said. "Right now we feel like someone is playing a game with us." Wright left behind 3 children for whom the fate of their father is anything but a game. "Josh deserves closure. His kids deserve closure," Morris said. "The whole family is a mess." Dawson said she misses playing basketball and having movie nights with her uncle. "Josh would give a stranger the shirt off his back," she said. "He's a very loving person." About Boyd, police have never disclosed a suspected cause of death for Boyd. In fact, the brief news stories that ran after his remains were identified say little of note at all. "The case caught my attention because Boyd is included on a poster featuring unsolved murders in Cincinnati's District 3, which stood out because the city's cold cases generally can be found on the Ohio Attorney General's website, but Boyd's isn't there. Wright's is, but as a missing person, though foul play has always been suspected. Turns out, there's a reason. While questions circle about Boyd's death that police want answers to, it's not technically considered a homicide. Cincinnati Police Lieutenant Steve Saunders said the remains found weren't complete enough to determine cause of death. Boyd's ex-wife spoke to FOX19 in 2019 and said that he'd been estranged from his family for about 2 years after meeting a woman in a bar. She had no doubt that something terrible happened to him, she said. The ex-wife, whose name wasn't published, said she had a daughter with Boyd. "My daughter's a mess, she can't sleep," she tearfully said. She's sick to her stomach. The only connection that Boyd and Wright seemed to have with each other was that they both knew a woman who lived in a home on Lionel Avenue near the location the remains were found. That woman has since died. Got ips? Families of both Wright and Boyd want answers, even if those answers won't bring back their loved ones. People with information can call Cincinnati Police's Homicide Unit at 513-352-3542 or Crime Stoppers at 513-352-3040.
Number 5.
There was nothing out of the ordinary for Lakira Goldsmith and her boyfriend on November 27, 2018. He picked her up from her Montgomery, Alabama home in the 4500 block of Narrow Lane Road, and when he dropped her off later that day, her grandmother witnessed her getting out of his vehicle. The grandmother waited for Lakira to make her way into the house, but for some reason, she never went back inside. When 20-year-old Lakira didn't return, her family searched the apartment complex. According to the Charlie Project, the maintenance man for the complex told the family that he'd let Lakira use his home around 2 a.m. The last time he reportedly saw her was when she was talking to someone while using his phone outside, but when he returned to check on her, she was gone, and the phone was sitting on the steps. It's believed that Lakira was on her way to see her friend in North Montgomery when she disappeared. No one has seen or heard from Lakira since that time. She's a very friendly person, her mother, Marchelle Goldsmith, told the Montgomery Advertiser. She could walk in a room and light up the room. She tried to help anybody. She tried to make everyone like her. She's just a sweet and caring person, always wanted to look out for others, even when she was sick. She has severe asthma, and it'd be hard for her to breathe most of the time, but she didn't let that stop her. Lakira was known to be active on social media, so when her accounts were no longer being updated, her loved ones feared the worst. Her son was a toddler when Lakira went missing, and her family is adamant that she would never leave her child behind, especially without contacting anyone. Her loved ones, including her mother and her sister, continue to post flyers at businesses within Montgomery and surrounding areas. All over town, service stations, grocery stores, anywhere that would allow me to hang one up, Marchelle told Alabama News. However, it's been a year and a half, and the investigation hasn't gained any momentum. Montgomery Police Captain Regina Duckett said, "There have been no new leads or developments that would define a search area." Marchelle believes that Lakira may have been kidnapped. At the time of her disappearance, Lakira was described as being approximately 5 feet 5 inches tall and 155 pounds. She has black or dark brown hair. She was last seen with blonde extensions with dark roots, with brown eyes. Lakira has multiple piercings including her ears, lower lip, and a snake-eye tongue. She was last wearing a velvet knee-length dress, a silver rhinestone choker necklace, a silver lip ring, and sliver rhinestone earrings. She has severe asthma and has been hospitalized on multiple occasions due to her condition. She did not take her medication with her. Anyone with information regarding this case is urged to contact the Montgomery Police Department at 334-625-2810. Her agency case number is 2018-00255833.
Number 6.
LeShay Dungey has not been seen since January 2018. She was last heard from after she left a Kota bus on January 24, 2018, heading to a friend's house. Her family is asking for any bit of information that might lead to her whereabouts. More than 19 months ago, LeShay Dungey planned to visit a friend near the Ohio State University campus. Shay, as she is known by her family, had been out looking for jobs on January 24, 2018, before she hopped on the number 22 Kota bus headed toward Summit Street. Dungey had been communicating with the friend through Facebook Messenger while she was on the bus. At 8:25 p.m. she sent a message saying she was walking and close by and to please unlock the door. The bus stop where she is believed to have left the bus was about 7 blocks from the friend's home. Dungey never got there. Police said messages sent to her from the friend show that she never arrived. And she hasn't been heard from since. Get the news delivered to your inbox. Sign up for our morning, afternoon and evening newsletters on Monday. Dungey's father, Duane Dungey, tearfully pleaded for his daughter to come home. He said he has been living a dad's nightmare since the day his daughter disappeared. I can't describe the pain, he said. Dungey's stepmother, Mia Johnson, said Dungey is fearless. If she was in danger, she probably didn't even know it, Johnson said. Dungey's father said that, after graduating from the Southwestern City School District, Dungey wanted to show her independence. He said he had tracked her phone in the past, but had tried to give his daughter space. I stopped doing it, and this is what happened, he said. Dungey is 21. At the time of her disappearance she was 5'9" and weighed between 120 and 140 pounds. Detective Jason Brammer of the Columbus Police Missing Persons Unit is the lead investigator on the case and said many of the leads have dried up in the time that has passed. I want to bring her home to her family, he said. Brammer said Dungey did not have a data plan on her cell phone and used wireless internet to communicate with her family and friends, mainly through Facebook Messenger. If she was able to communicate with her family, she would have done so, Brammer said. The detective did not want to speculate about what has happened to Dungey and said every option is still open. Detectives have performed digital forensics and DNA testing in the case, as well as a significant amount of footwork to try to find Dungey, Brammer said. Anybody who knows anything at this point, if you saw something, if you still have video from that time, you might think it's small, but it's not for me, Brammer said. That's all we're asking for, any little bit of information. Anonymous tips can also be submitted through Central Ohio Crime Stoppers by calling 614-461-TIPS. Crime Stoppers tips leading to the return of Dungey might result in a reward.
Number 7.
47-year-old John Calvert was last seen in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina on March 3, 2008. He vanished along with his wife, Elizabeth Calvert, shortly after meeting with a business associate who was embezzling money from them. John grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. He graduated from Georgia Institute of Technology with a degree in mechanical engineering in 1983. In 1988, John married his wife, Elizabeth Calvert. The couple moved to a house off Peachtree Road in the Brookhaven neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. They also lived part-time on their 40-foot yacht, the Yellow Jacket, docked at the Harbor Town Marina. For many years John worked for several power companies, including Duke Energy. In 2001, he took semi-retirement before venturing out on his own. At the time of his disappearance, John owned 4 businesses on Hilton Head Island, including the company that operated the Harbor Town Yacht Basin and a vacation rental company that managed 125 properties. On March 3, 2008, John arrived for a meeting with Dennis Ray Jerwing, a business associate with the club group, at the company office on Sea Pines Center in Hilton Head Island, around 6 p.m. His wife, Elizabeth Calvert, arrived a bit later, after changing clothes on the couple's yacht. The couple never returned home from the meeting and has not been heard since. On March 4, 2008, Elizabeth's brother filed a missing persons report to the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office after they both missed business appointments and couldn't be reached. On March 7, 2008, a sheriff's deputy found one of the couple's 3 vehicles, a silver 2006 Mercedes E320, In the parking lot of the Marriott Hotel in the Palmetto Dunes Resort, a gated community 6 miles from the harbor town marina. The couple's cellular phones couldn't be located and were likely turned off after the meeting. Their bank accounts and credit cards showed no activity after their disappearance. 54-year-old Dennis Ray Jerwing, a certified public accountant working for the club group, was the last person known to have seen the couple. John had hired the club group to handle administrative and financial services for his commercial properties. In December of 2007, the couple decided to terminate services with the company after Elizabeth noticed financial irregularities. Jerwing told police that he met with John and Elizabeth Calvert on March 3, 2008 around 6 p.m. He said the meeting lasted about 15 minutes and that they left his office around 6:30 p.m., presumably for dinner. On March 8, 2008, police obtained search warrants for Jerwing's home at 8 Bent Tree Lane in Hilton Head Plantation, his office at 71 Lighthouse Road, and his 2 vehicles, a 2004 pewter-colored Toyota Avalon and a 2001 dark gray GMC Yukon. Inside his home, police found a shovel, muddy shoes, and an empty holster for a .22 caliber Beretta pistol that was never located. Authorities discovered that, before meeting with the Calverts on March 3, 2008, Jerwing purchased 3 heavy-duty drop cloths at a hardware store around 4:15 p.m. About an hour after his meeting with the Calverts, Jerwing suffered a laceration to his right hand for which he bought bandages and latex gloves at CVS Pharmacy on Pope Avenue, around 7:15 p.m. The following day, Jerwing drove the vehicle he had been driving on the night of the couple's disappearance to a car repair shop to have it thoroughly cleaned. One of the back seats in the vehicle was missing. Person of interest in missing couple's case found dead on March 11, 2008. Jerwing was found dead in a locked bathroom of a villa in Sea Pines around 4 p.m., just 2 hours after the sheriff's office publicly announced him as a person of interest in the disappearance of John and Elizabeth Calvert. Jerwing had been staying in the villa since police executed search warrants on his home. He was found covered in blood, lying on a comforter in the bathtub. He had slashed his right inner thigh, right inner calf, his left wrist, and right and left lower neck with a steak knife which was found at his side. The cause of death was concluded to be suicide. Authorities approximated the time of his death sometime between 5 a.m. 9 a.m. on March 10, 2008. 2 suicide notes were found inside the bathroom of the villa. The first one was written in pen on a bedsheet, but was described as nearly illegible. The second note was an envelope filled with rambling financial details in which Jerwing acknowledged that he stole money from John's businesses. However, nothing in the notes confirmed his involvement in their disappearance, nor was there any denial that he was responsible. The club group company finances were audited by the FBI and the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office. It was discovered that Jerwing had embezzled $2.1 million from the Calverts and 7 other clients in a secret account. Foul play is strongly suspected in John Calvert's disappearance. Authorities believe Dennis Ray Jerwing killed John and Elizabeth Calvert at the club group's offices during their meeting, before moving their bodies to his car. The following day, Jerwing drove somewhere within a 5 or 6 hour driving radius of Hilton Head Island before burying their bodies in a shallow grave. Their bodies were never found, nor was the gun believed to be the murder weapon. In November 2009, John Calvert was declared legally dead by a Georgia court, along with his wife, Elizabeth Calvert. The circumstances of John Calvert's disappearance remain unclear, and his case is currently classified as missing. His case remains unsolved. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of John Calvert, please contact the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office at 843-524-2777.